Welcome back to the Sandwich Generation Pod. I'm Robyn.
And I'm Eliesa, and welcome back to part 2 of our conversation about medical assistance for long-term care in Minnesota.
We are joined by Rachel Schromen, an elder care attorney and founder of Schromen Law. Rachel focuses her practice on medical assistance, long-term care planning, and helping families navigate one of the most confusing systems we have. Let's keep it going. Okay, so let's say that someone has, let's say they have $10,000, right? And they maybe have engaged a lawyer. What's next?
At that juncture, if they're to the point of really qualifying soon, they would really just be hiring, I think, an attorney to walk through the application process and support it getting done quickly and not being delayed and taking 6 months or a year or more.
What about, let's back way up then. Let's talk about pre-planning. Like, what kind of things go into consideration when people are strategically planning for a time in life when they will probably need to go on medical assistance for long-term care?
So if we're way ahead in planning, and we can talk a little about the 5-year look back, but if I have clients come in and they're planning way in advance, sometimes they are deciding to make gifts of money or property or assets to their kids, basically move things out of their estate well in advance of needing to apply for medical assistance for long-term care. I think sometimes people hear that and they think people are doing this a ton and they're moving millions of dollars. That's not really the case. But every once in a while, we'll have some families who maybe they do gift into a 529 for a grandchild well in advance, or they make a larger gift to their children, or they move the family cabin into a cabin trust because they want to make certain that that stays in the family and doesn't have to be sold to pay for long-term care. If we're not within that, if we don't feel confident about that 5-year window, say maybe someone comes in and we know, well, this might be coming in a year or so, or it's around the corner, but we have a good chunk of cash, we'll really be analyzing what can we do with this money rather than just writing checks to the nursing home and waiting for it to get down. What can we do with this money, and or what might be protected that we don't realize? There are all sorts of exemptions that exist that, unless you know all the exemptions or you're an attorney who does this, they can go miss. There's also ways to utilize the money that sometimes people get nervous and they just don't spend anything. Mm-hmm. And you can spend the money. You can.
So what are some examples? Do you have some examples of just for instance, hypothetically?
Yep. Well, I almost always recommend doing prepaid funeral planning. If you have money sitting there, pay for the funeral now so your kids aren't left with $3,000 to plan a funeral. Yep. If there is a spouse that is staying in the home, there are a good number of things we can do. The woman that I worked with whose husband went into memory care, she made improvements to her home that would help her age in place. So sure. Putting in a walk-in shower rather than stepping over tubs, just getting things that would allow her to stay in the house longer, and spending the money on that rather than trying to figure out where to find the money later after her husband was on long-term care. They had reduced assets. I've had families where spouses still in the home invest in a newer and safer vehicle. If you can keep one vehicle, don't keep driving the 1998 Civic you've had for 10 years. Those are some things that we've had people do. Exemptions that get missed a lot. In Minnesota, there is a caregiver homestead exemption that can exist. And I'll kind of give you an idea of how that works with the story. So I was meeting with a woman and her daughter, and the woman was wanting to do some of this proactive planning, and we were also updating her estate planning documents at the same time. And they were asking very specific questions. We were really focused on the estate planning, and we have this hour-long meeting. We get to the end, and we're walking out, and the daughter says, gosh, I'm really glad to be buttoning this up. When I sold my house and moved here to take care of mom, I was really overwhelmed or something. And I paused, and I went, wait, you moved in with your mom to take care of her? She said, yeah. I said, how long ago did you do that? She said 6 years. I went, huh, you think your mom would have been in a nursing home if you weren't taking care of her? Oh yeah, like we know she'd be in a nursing home probably 4 years ago if I wasn't taking care of her. And so I'm sitting here and I'm like, oh my God, I think this $600,000 house is exempt.
Sure.
And so I went back in the conference room, I have more questions, and we, at that juncture, we hadn't gotten into that much detail. These are questions we screen for. But I was like, the house is exempt. We can move the house into your name because of this exemption that exists in Minnesota.
Because she was the family member was an in-home caregiver for the parent
for a certain period of time.
Sure.
But for the care provided, mom would have been in a nursing home sooner. And there's all these statutory, in order to meet the exemption, you have to make sure you meet all the requirements under the statute. And then we worked with her to basically create a file. Because what we expect is she's going to apply and the county's going to say, wait a minute, what about this house? And she's going to say, well, it's an exempt. And they're going to go, yeah, prove it. And then she's going to go, here you go.
Here you go. That's amazing.
That's a success story.
Yeah.
That was a fun one.
Must feel so satisfying.
What Rachel considers fun, everybody.
Well, and the thing is that this doesn't happen that often because
Right.
the county rules are so tight. I had a client once where dad was going into a nursing home, and without getting into the details, by selling the house, taking the penalty period from the 5-year look back and then paying through the penalty period, they came out $200,000 ahead.
Wow.
That was just a math game. And that also doesn't happen very often, but that was a really fun one. And so I was working with this client and they're like, he's going into a nursing home. We're having to sell the house. We don't know what to do. Should we sell the house? Shouldn't we? And as I dove in and as I did the work and as I started applying the facts and doing the math, I was like, oh my God, you actually, if you sell the house and take the penalty period, you're going to come out ahead. That's the kind of stuff that when elder law attorneys get into the mix, they can help with. There's, it gets really complex really quickly, but we've had clients who move their assets to a child and then use a Medicaid compliant annuity to pay for care through the penalty period. There's really, really fun, like, again, nerdy lawyer fun, but there's fun, unique, like creative things that can be done.
Yeah.
It's just a matter of doing it soon enough because, again, if I get a phone call from someone and they have $10,000, we're probably not doing any of that.
Yeah.
I just was going to say, as somebody who is not as experienced as you guys in all of this, hearing the terms of 5-year look back, asset reduction, spend down, can you sort of, I know those are all three very major things, but can you sort of give us a little lesson on what we're talking about here?
As you said it, I kind of like, for people listening, I kind of shook my head and my eyes got big, like, because it is confusing. Like, I have been practicing law for 13 years now, but I'm still a new enough attorney that I remember trying to learn this. And I remember being confused and being like, well, what the heck is the difference between asset reduction and spend down? So asset reduction talks about the process where someone is reducing their assets in order to qualify for medical assistance for long-term care. They can only have $3,000. They have $20,000. They need to reduce their assets. The spend down is what happens usually on a monthly basis once someone is on medical assistance for long-term care.
Okay.
Lisa said, well, mom and dad can have $120. Well, they're getting more than $120 every month. So what happens is mom gets $3,120 every month. She has to spend down $3,000 of it. And usually,
that is so helpful because people interchange spend down and asset reduction all the time. Or spend down. Thank you.
Lawyers call asset reduction spend down. Like, it's such a common slang, $3,000 spent. So if we're spending down $3,000 every month, what that really means is $3,000 is going to the nursing home. And then we're keeping 120. At the end of the year, if those accounts have built up a little bit, you might have this other spend down you're doing. And then the 5-year look back, what that refers to, and again, keep in mind, this is all state specific. That's another fun thing is sometimes states use different terminology. So what we call one thing, states call another. Yeah. So the 5-year look back in Minnesota, and I think it's pretty similar in other states, but different states have different time periods and it might work a little differently. In Minnesota, when you apply for medical assistance for long-term care, the application is going to ask, have you gifted or gotten rid of any assets in the last 5 years? And on that application, you're signing under penalty of perjury that you're telling the truth. And as Eliesa has shared, they will pull your bank records. They will look at property records. So let's say I'm applying for medical assistance for long-term care. And on the application, it says, have you gifted any assets in the last 5 years? And I think about it and I go, I gave $50,000 to my son when he was getting divorced 2 years ago. So I write down $50,000. I turn it in. The county looks at it and they go, okay, so within the last 5 years, you gave your son $50,000. We really would have liked it if you kept that. So we're going to assess a penalty period. The state has an average monthly skilled nursing home facility dollar amount that they assess regularly and they adjust it. Recently it was around the $10,000 range, which makes for easy math. So I'm going to use that. So the county goes, okay, $50,000 on our estimation. If you had $50,000, you would have been able to pay for 5 months of your own care. So you have a penalty period of 5 months because of that money you transferred. We'll start paying on month 6. So then the person is in a position where, you hear it called the 5-year look back, the 5-year clawback.
Mm-hmm.
Well, if that $50,000 has been spent, you're not clawing it back.
Right.
So they assess the penalty period, and then the family's having to figure out, how do we pay through this penalty period?
Because they applied with the $3,000 and now suddenly they're going to have to pay $50,000.
Yep, because
No,
of the 5-year look back.
Right.
Because
I mean,
They wouldn't have to pay
essentially-
$50,000 though, but they would have to pay 5
Well, the
months of that fixed
$10,000.
amount.
Yeah. I mean, if it's
Oh, no, that's
$10,000
true.
for 5
That's true.
months, then it is $50,000. Yeah.
Well, and that's assuming the care is $10,000, right? If it's a little less, they pay a little less. But if it's more, which often it is, it's just that 5-month penalty.
Sure.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
But I had
go ahead.
that can be strategic, because I had a client I worked with recently who did not do their elder law planning with me. So I didn't give this advice, but they came to me once they were past 5 years. And this is not something I see commonly, but she moved a $1.5 million investment account into her only daughter's name. And then 3 years later, she went into a nursing home. Daughter used that money to private pay for 2 years and a month.
Mm-hmm.
And then once they were past the 5-year and the private pay period, Mom went on to medical assistance for long-term care, and there was more than 1.5 in that investment account.
Sure.
So then the government was like, well, until you spend that money, we're not going to put her on medical.
Because the gift was made more than 5 years. So when when they filled out the application, it said, have you made any gifts in the last 5 years? She hadn't.
Right.
So
So
she
she was
didn't have
past
to
that
close
5-year look back.
Yeah.
Initially.
And that's kind of how the 5-year looks. Now,
Yeah.
that is a minority of the type of MA planning our firm is doing. That does not happen. We don't see that often at all. And in fact, we have families come in where they say, I don't want to, they come in and they go, I don't want to have to sell my house to pay for a nursing home. And we go, okay, then that means not owning your house anymore and getting it out of your name. And they don't want to do that either. So it's not that common that you're going to have a client moving a $1.5 million investment account out of their name. This was a very, very unique situation, but I offer it as an example of how the 5-year look back works and functions and how you can be strategic with it.
So I have a question. If a family has done estate planning with plenty of time, and let's say that there's like a cabin or something, and can they put like a cabin in a trust? And then let's say in 2 years from that time, a parent or whatever has to go into assisted living. Because it's in a trust, is it more protected, or no? Is it always 5 years?
In Minnesota, trusts are still subject to the 5-year.
Okay.
Yeah.
Damn.
Good to know. No, I know. It's intense, right?
As people come in and they're like, well, we just want to put it in the trust so it's protected later this year. And it's like, it's still subject to the 5-year.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. That's what I thought, but I wanted to clarify that because I've heard otherwise, right? But I was always like, I don't know if that's true. Yeah.
Well, and that's the thing is each state is different. I am only licensed in Minnesota. I do not know other states' laws because one, I don't need to, and two, I literally cannot practice in other states. So why would I learn the laws, right? We're close in the metro area in Minnesota. We're very close to Wisconsin. I have a colleague named Amy who is licensed in Minnesota and Wisconsin. We refer to her every once in a while because Wisconsin's laws are a little more friendly.
They are.
Around MA. And so we have clients that will move their parents or their spouse to Wisconsin across the river.
Yep.
So that's where, when you say like, well, I thought the irrevocable trust would protect it and the 5-year look back doesn't apply. Well, that concept might be accurate in another state.
Right. Yep.
And for the
I have
confusion-
also heard from just people that we've come in contact with that Wisconsin, it's a much more friendly process to apply for medical assistance for long-term care for whoever that helps.
So my mom is 73, I think she's 73, and she's not in ill health. This is the time where I want to be learning about this stuff. So it's kind of like, if you start looking into this and learning, Wisconsin's a little more friendly, 3 months before parents are going to qualify, now not only are you navigating the situation, but you're possibly considering a residency change. Information and education is empowering. And so it's like getting the information and just knowing. So then as you're navigating it, you can you're operating from an empowered place rather than a place of crisis and urgency. And I don't know about you guys, but when I have to make a decision urgently or I feel like I'm in crisis, they usually aren't my best decisions. It's not when I'm making the best choices.
Yeah.
Been there.
It is so true. It holds true every time. And I love that information and education is empowering because I feel like I was scrambling when I was in the midst of this,
and you had no choice.
And I had no choice. So, that was just our story. But if people are, actually we did a news segment last week and the host, they're both like, our parents are in good health. And I was like looking across the table at them, like
go now.
Right before the cameras went on. And I was like, now is your time. Like you have to seize the day. Like it is right now. And they're kind of like, all right, lady, chill. But I was like, you gotta, like, you're in that is such a gift. It is such a gift to have the time and the ability to plan like this. I will also say that seeing other residents in my parents' assisted living communities, a lot of them had funds. They had hundreds of thousands of dollars to work with. And because they were on private pay and because of the cost of care in America right now, that money has left them so quickly, right? Far quicker. I mean, they had potentially like 5 to 6 times what my parents had. And they thought that would absolutely last them for the rest of their life and then some. And maybe they would have some to gift. And because the cost of care is so high, the money has gone so quickly that so many of them have actually had to apply for medical assistance for long-term care because it's not, you know what I mean? Like the money has run out and they didn't plan for that. So now they're elderly. Their families are also kind of being taken by surprise because of the cost. Frankly, people probably aren't like thrilled with the care that they're even receiving. And that's, everyone is doing their best. The caregivers in my parents' assisted living are incredible. They're also not being paid enough, right? Like it's such a broken system, in my opinion. Like nothing really adds up. But my point is that there are some elderly people who are like there's no social worker to help them. There's no, people in the building can only help to a certain extent, but they're kind of on their own all of a sudden to apply for medical assistance. And they never thought that they would need to be here. And I remember there was one woman who said something to my mom, and I hope I get this right, but she was basically like, I thought I had all the money in the world. And now I'm here. And she's stressed because her application has been in for 8 months. She doesn't have support or help. And she doesn't, she's worried about getting approved or not. And, there's kind of this common thread of grief. And and maybe they can commiserate together because assisted living is also like high school. But it's like they're all like, well, I guess we're all here living off of $120 a month. Like, what did it all matter? And they all were doing their best, you know, with the money they had, with the advice they had gotten. And now I know my eyes as a family member are just open so much more to this whole process. I had no idea. But that's also a reality for a lot of people out there.
Yeah, we've just been through the process, like I've been saying, of getting my parents into a new place, and the admissions person was one of the first people to say to me, I had gone to I toured like, I don't know, 8 places. If anyone's got any questions, DM me. And she was the first person to actually say, it's medical assistance, and the waiver is almost an inevitability for anyone. Who could afford this? Like, who could afford this? I mean, just to give you guys an idea, I mean, we're talking about like when you get into it, they're paying, you know, your parents are paying for their rent, and then they're paying for their cares, and their meals are somewhere mixed in there, but it's easily $6,000 a month on the low end. And we've seen as high as $19,000 for my parents. So sorry, Dad, if you listen to this and I shared your finances, but I mean, that's a lot of money for anybody.
So this is something I wanted to say because I think that this is important. So you were mentioning that the asset reduction is when you're spending money to qualify for medical assistance, and the spend down is like the monthly kind of accumulation that you're spending, right? So from a very practical standpoint, now that we are in the medical assistance system, my parents, they have their monthly my parents have their monthly rent. They have their elderly care waiver obligation that we pay, and that number is the one that keeps changing from the county. They have a health insurance premium, and I think there's some other medical fees that come out of that. And so that is most of their budget, I would say. It all comes down to like this math calculation, a very specific math calculation. And in their situation, a little bit does accumulate though throughout the year. And my parents' renewals are always due in the fall. I know that every fall or like late summer, I need to start thinking about their spend down, because they have to be at that $3,000 mark or under to at renewal time. And I have to prove that. So I have to spend the money earlier.
And you're saying that is because there's a spend down of that $120 per month that they get, but that at the end of the year, they have to each have $3,000 flat.
Almost. So they are allowed $120 a month to spend however they want.
But they have to spend that $120.
They don't have to.
Oh.
That can accumulate over the months. That's just like their money. That's what the state is giving them as their money. So they can use that towards groceries, to going to the movies, to buying their clothes, all of that, right? If they don't spend their $120 that month, it is fine to stay in that bank account, right? That's fine. That's their money. But before their renewals come due, there's always a little bit extra, right? With their money that hasn't been paid yet to assisted living or for any of their other bills. That is not just free spending money for them. That needs to be spent in a very specific way for their spend down. But by the time, basically like a month before their renewals are due, I have to make sure that their bank accounts show that they have, that their savings account is at that $3,000 or less. And, you know.
And then their other account is what?
Well, their other account is their spending money. So they're $120 a month, which is usually spent.
So they can have, okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
But I have to prove that their assets are $3,000 or less without question. And again, that has to be, there's like planning every year that I have to mark on my calendar, because sometimes we have like, I'm like, okay, what clothes do you need? Right? Like, what other medical, like 1 year we got a lift chair for them. And that was a little bit of an exception because they had a van, they had a vehicle, and then they ended up selling that asset. My parents stopped driving. So we had a little more cash to spend. So we were like, okay, what medical devices sort of, right? Whether that be a electric scooter, a new walker, a lift chair, things like that. Medical products usually qualify.
Because there's only
in the
certain things
Spenddown.
you can spend that money on.
Absolutely. Yeah.
That's why it's called the Spenddown.
You can't gift it. You can't like go on vacation with it. You can't, you can't really give it away. It's like it has to be used in a very certain way towards their care or their health care, or it goes to the assisted living, or it goes to the nursing home, or it goes, to pay more of that waiver. Can you speak at all to that, Rachel, on, am I getting that all right, I guess?
Yeah. Yeah.
For
And
the
what you're
Spenddown?
explaining is something that people run into. I mean, I've had clients say, like, we have this money accumulating and my mom can only get her nails done so much. Or, what else can we be using that money on?
I always feel like I'm spending it wrong. And you also have to keep all of your receipts because you have to prove absolutely everything on how you've used that money to the county.
So this is what I was going to say is like, let's say you've gone through the process, you've qualified. You can also engage a lawyer to sort of help with the renewal process and the spend down if you have the funds. But those funds would have to come from the caregiver at that point because your parents wouldn't have the funds for that.
But they might, if there's too much money, they might. It just depends.
So could that extra money go to legal fees?
Yep.
That's great. Okay.
Yep.
Okay.
Yep.
So that's a really helpful point or tip, right? If you're in this position, engage a lawyer with that money.
Someone's child is hiring us in their role of supporting their parents with this. The parents' funds are paying for the lawyer.
Yes. That makes sense.
But I didn't know if the spend down counted for legal fees. Like if that money could go to legal fees.
I believe it is.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, that's great.
And one thing, and I say this a little tongue in cheek, but lawyers write the laws. So lawyers can always get paid and they usually get paid first. That's one thing when I went to law school, I was kind of putting this together and I was like, okay, well, lawyers write the laws. Makes sense.
Also, though, that money would be well spent. That would be worth it. 1,000%. Yeah.
And I'll share too. I mean, we've had people reach out to our firm, and I usually do kind of a screening call to figure out what's the situation, what are the assets, et cetera, et cetera. And there've been occasions where someone calls, and I tell them it does not make sense to hire an attorney. I can point them in the right direction. I can give them some other resources. And so when you're assessing, does it make sense for me to hire an attorney? What does it cost? When you reach out to a lawyer, you're getting information to make that decision, and you can call more than one. It's a big choice to make.
Okay, for all of you listening who know the friend that would totally love to hear this episode, stop right now and send it to them. Shares and reviews help this podcast a ton, and we also just want to get this information out to all the caregivers out there who are in the sandwich generation. Okay, back to the episode. Okay,
so, are you still listening? Have you fallen asleep? Are you guys still there?
Are you
really
learning?
gotten into it?
I know. Are you learning as much as we are? Because I know it's such a dense, hard
it's juicy,
topic,
though.
But
juicy.
It is so informative and it's good. Like I wish I had stumbled upon this, early on. I would have certainly called an attorney right away. Okay, so let's talk about medical assistant divorces. This is a term that I hear a lot. My husband is also a family law attorney and he sometimes handles these. But what is a medical assistant's divorce and why do these happen?
So this is when couples divorce later in life in order to essentially protect one of the spouses from the other spouse's long-term care costs. Actually, when I started practicing law, I first and foremost was a bankruptcy attorney. It was just like the first job I got out of law school. And at that time in Minnesota, spouses were jointly and severally liable for medical bills. That's law. That law has changed in Minnesota, but we were one of like 6 states that had it. So most of my clients were filing bankruptcy due to a dead or dying spouse's medical bills. It was brutal.
Wow.
So if you weren't legally married, you weren't jointly and severally liable. If you are not legally married and your spouse is in a nursing home, the nursing home's looking at their assets, but they're not looking at yours as the spouse.
Sure.
So in some situations, it can make sense for a couple to get legally divorced with the caveat that those divorces don't look like, oh, spouse going into the nursing home gets $5 and the other spouse gets everything. They have to be fair. They have to be in line with state statute or else frankly, it's fraud.
Right.
You should not get divorced for purposes of qualifying for medical assistance. But that's why these couples do that. And
Sure.
that gets very fact specific. Might be interesting. I don't do divorce law, so I know about it high level.
If you're married and your significant other is declining in health, obviously early planning is the best case scenario, but there are options.
Correct. And I've had clients that come in thinking they want to divorce, but that's less financially beneficial than if they stay married. It's fact specific, of course, but that's what, when people refer to an MA divorce, that's what that means. They're really just ending the legal aspect of their marriage.
Sure. Okay. So what is the most frequent question you get from the children of aging parents when it comes to medical assistance?
The most frequent question we get is how to protect the house. A lot of people, a home is their biggest asset. It's the one they're most proud of. There's a lot of sentimental value attached to it. If one parent is staying in the home, that's really a big concern. So we get a lot of questions about how to protect the house. We get a lot of questions about what they're allowed to spend money on. You know, Eliesa, you've done a lot of research. You know what you can. You are fortunate to be able to be a really strong advocate for your parents, but it is very common that individuals and their children are scared to even buy a new piece of clothing. They think now that MAs are on the corner or I'm on MA, I'm not allowed to spend money. And then a lot of children ask, what should we be doing now to make certain we can continue to help our parents as they continue to age? So kind of buttoning up that estate planning piece and getting legal protections. So as health declines or cognition declines, children can continue to play a strong advocacy role.
Sure. I relate so much to like feeling like you can't spend money, because even in knowing what I can kind of spend money on now, I question it every time too, you know? So that's like a very common feeling for caregivers. Okay. So our last question before we wrap it up on this big episode of medical assistance for long-term care is when? When is the right time to start? When is the right time to call?
So I always say that there's no such thing as too early, because worst case scenario, we have a conversation. We talk about, you know, maybe we don't need to jump in the deep end on this planning right now, but here's some things you might want to watch for. Here's what you might want to think about. Here's some things to start learning about. I've done estate planning for couples in their 50s that say we want to do MA planning right away. And they're both healthy. I mean, they still have kids that are teenagers. And I say, well, you're really ahead of the ball. And I don't think some of these more intense strategies are anything you're going to want to implement right now. And maybe you do start doing some of this stuff. Maybe you start thinking about that. These are some things to watch for where we might want to start wading towards the deep end on this planning. So it's never too early, because if you're being too proactive, you know, there's still some things you can do. And at a minimum, you're learning, when should I come back to start doing more aggressive.
That makes a lot of sense.
I had one more little additional question to that, even though we said that was our last one. I know you said you don't really do applications. So let's say I was going to go to another elder law attorney to do the application. Would they also be able to offer me the planning that you're talking about and the strategy? Yeah. Or is it some do just applications and some do?
So of the attorneys in Minnesota that I know who do a lot of applications, they can also do all of the strategic planning.
So they can look at the holistic picture and then also do the application.
Yes. Of the attorneys, that's a good question, Robyn. And that's for, listeners who want an attorney who can do both. Ask that when you reach out. Say, I know I need help with the application, but I also want an attorney who can assess if there's anything that would be strategic or a good idea to do prior to the application. And I can't imagine doing an application not knowing the other pieces.
Yeah, I didn't know if it was mechanics versus strategy. You know what I mean? We just do the process. We fill out the paperwork and we do this versus we do the strategy.
You'd want an attorney who does both. The only reason we don't do, my firm in particular doesn't do applications right now, is we just don't have the staff,
The bandwidth, yeah.
paralegal, and
Yep.
it would be asinine to pay attorney's fees for an attorney to sit on hold
Yeah.
with the county.
Yeah.
But there's a good resource for listeners, and this is nationwide. NAELA, the National Association of Elder Law Attorneys.
NAELA?
You got it. NAELA. You can search attorneys state by state who are members of NAELA. And these are going to
cool.
be attorneys who are joining NAELA because they are passionate about elder law. They're practicing it in depth. Of the Minnesota attorneys I know that are members of NAELA, they are all amazing elder law attorneys, great colleagues of mine. And I've made referrals to NAELA attorneys in other states, and my clients have been very happy with them. So that's a good
Awesome.
resource to find an elder law attorney.
That is incredible.
great.
Okay, last question, I swear. If someone is hiring an attorney for medical assistance for long-term care planning, what can they expect in terms of the cost, in terms of maintenance fees? I know it's going to vary, right? But like,
It varies so drastically. What I will say is, like with our firm, we do everything from a simple $500 consult. So I have a woman who she just needs some information about the caregiver exemption for the house.
Yeah.
We can probably cover that in a consult. When our firm does really strategic letters and more in-depth medical assistance planning, that can be upwards of $4,000 or more.
Sure. Yep.
I know firms that you can, if you're doing really complex annuities and more comprehensive, it can be $20,000 or more. But what I will say is with this type of legal work, if you're spending $20,000, you're likely protecting or saving way more than that amount.
You're going to come out ahead.
Yeah.
You're going to come out ahead.
Yes. And if you're hiring an attorney, they should be able to demonstrate that to you prior to you hiring them.
Sure. Yeah.
So
that
those
makes
are
a lot of
questions
sense.
to ask. I mean, sometimes that's the thing is, I'm not so jaded that I don't understand it's a big investment, especially when you're in this already kind of financially tight situation. And when I sit and tell a client, our legal fees for this are going to be, it's a $4,200 fee, and their eyes get big, they can then, well, what is it getting us? And I should be able to explain, like, I'm going to give you advice that's going to protect and utilize way more than the legal fee you are paying. And so I encourage individuals who are learning about this, learning the fees, ask the attorney those questions. They're there to help you, but they also work for you. You're interviewing them. You can ask those questions of a lawyer. And if it doesn't make sense for you to hire the attorney, a lot of the people I refer to, if you're going to spend $10,000 on a $2,000 small claims court case, the attorney should tell you it doesn't make sense.
Right. Right.
The attorneys will.
Yeah. Yeah.
I have learned so much from both of you, by the way. I just sitting here knowing I'm about to embark on this, learning from a legal perspective, professional, and then learning from someone who anecdotally has been through it. I am so grateful for this episode. And yeah.
Well, I hope it's one that will help a lot of people. And Rachel, thank you so much for your time and your expertise. Rachel Schromen of
You're a
Schromen Law,
star.
everyone.
You're a star, girl.
She's amazing.
Thank
You're
you.
amazing. All right. We hope you enjoyed today's episode, and hopefully you can take away some helpful info and tips. All links and resources can be found in our show notes.
Please share this episode with anyone you think this might help. And if you have a topic that you'd like to talk more with us about in the sandwich generation world, please slide into our DMs on Instagram. Our handle is @thesandwichgenerationpod. We hope you'll be back for more combos with us soon. And remember, no matter whose diaper you're changing, you're never alone. That was great.